Hello tacticians, my name is Nathan Ng, and today we're going to be discussing the massive 11.4 patch and the must-know information that you're going to need to start climbing now. It's good to be back. Alright, so 11.4 will be seeing some sweeping changes across the board, with many reroll compositions falling out of favor, as well as system changes to Lucky Lanterns and the Chosen mechanic. Before we begin, our question of the day is, what change in 11.4 are you most excited about? Let us know in the comments down below. So, starting off, let's go ahead and take a look at the biggest system changes that you'll need to know and get acquainted with to know how to properly pilot your games. Number 1. The Lucky Lanterns. They adjusted the drop rate tables of Stage 3 and 4 lanterns. Stage 3 lanterns, no longer possible to get the 2 loaded dice or the 2 target dummies. Stage 4 lanterns, no longer possible to get 3 item components. Lucky Lanterns, especially with loaded dice, have often netted reroll players a free top 4 by easily securing their 3-star champion much earlier than usual. With this change, don't expect to be bailed out by the Lantern if you're trying to force a reroll composition. Also, game-to-game RNG shouldn't feel as bad, especially if the Lantern drop items like cloaks and chains or some counter comps such as mages or assassins. Number 2. Chosen odds. Chosen base odds are increased from 33% to 50%, and the Chosen bonus stats are spell powers being lowered from 30 to 15, attack damage lowered from 20 to 10, mana reduction lowered from 25% to 15%, and health lowered from 400 to 300. Rolling odds of level 4 is 60, 40, 0, 0, and 0 to 80, 20, 0, 0, and 0. Increasing the Chosen base odds to 50% means that you're going to be seeing a lot more of them in your shop. Consequently, you can be a lot more selective with your Chosens, especially if you have a lot of gold to reroll. The decrease in power of Chosen means that the games won't feel as unforgiving if you low roll, and the disparity between the non-Chosen and a Chosen champion won't be as apparent. The reduction of 2-cost Chosen odds at level 4 likely means that you're going to be less inclined to greed and skip a decent 1-cost Chosen in favor of pre-leveling at 1-3. Trade changes. Assassin. Critical chance reduced from 10, 30, and 55 to 10, 30, and 50%. Bonus critical damage reduced from 25, 60, and 100 to 25, 55, and 90%. Assassins were very straightforward to play, where you almost just push for all 6 if you had the Chosen. Now with the nerfs, games are going to be a lot more lobby dependent and nuanced. You might consider dropping down to 4 Assassin. You can go ahead and slot in some good frontline or legendary units. Brawler. Health reduced from 400, 700, 1000, and 1600 to 400, 700, 1000, and 1400. The attack damage is reduced from 10, 20, 60, and 120 to 10, 20, 40, and 80. Brawler was one of those traits that if you got an early Chosen Tahm Kench or Maokai, you almost always held it until the end of the game and played a Brawler. Nowadays, you're gonna have to adapt and most likely sell your 1-cost Chosen during the rolldowns at level 7 or 8 due to the heavy nerfs to 6 and 8 Brawler. Divine. True damage and damage reduction adjusted from 35, 45, 55, and 65 to 25, 40, 55, and 70. Divine last patch was kind of a joke trait, and you only needed 2 Divine for your Kale or Nasus to pop off. This change aims to bring down intervals more in line and hopefully make you think more about how many Divines you're gonna need. We suspect it's going down to either be the 4 or the 6 mark. Dragon Soul. Dragon Soul blast damage is going down from 50% to 40% max health. Dragon Soul spell power and attack speed is going from 40, 80, and 160 to 40, 70, and 140%. Dragon Soul is becoming very popular at the end of 11.3, being very flexible in the units that you could run and who could carry. These nerfs are justified, but Dragon Soul will still be extremely powerful, and we suspect him to rise to the top of the meta, as many other comps have been heavily nerfed as well. Cultist. Bonus magic resist for Cultist 9 adjusted from 20 to 60. Cultist hasn't really been in a great spot this entire set, and this small buff doesn't particularly address that issue. It still serves as a fine top 4 comp, but if you're looking to win games, stay away from Cultist 9. Duelist. 15, 25, 40, and 60% attack speed per stack to 12, 20, 35, and 60%. Duelists have been both really strong in the early and late game, but they were also flexible when it comes to units like Kale with the Spatula. Both Fiora and Yasuo are also getting nerfed, so we'll unlikely see as many Duelist players in this patch. Elderwood. Armor and magic resist decreased from 15, 25, and 40 to 15, 20, and 30. Attack damage and spell power reduced from 5, 10, and 20 to 5, 10, and 15. Elderwood 9 was winning far too much considering how easily attainable it was. This substantial nerf should make it so that games aren't as straightforward to go 9 Elderwood as they were in 11.3. You'll have to be much more selective whether to go 6 or 9 and determine if you can either slot in better units with the amount of gold that you have. Warlord. Health being reduced from 250, 500, and 850 to 250, 400, and 700. Spell power reduced from 25, 50, and 85 to 25, 40, and 70. Warlord was another trait that was far too simple to pilot whenever you got an early Warlord chosen. These nerfs were quite harsh, so we suspect that you won't be chasing 9 Warlord unless you get that early chosen and a Warlord spatula. Instead, a good mix of legendaries, frontline, and 3 or 6 Warlords is likely to be your strongest board in the late game. 1-cost champions. Diana. Attack speed reduced from 0.7 to 0.65. Cascade shield reduced from 175, 250, and 350. Cascade orb is being reduced from 80 to 85 to 90. Diana is being heavily nerfed across her kit. Coupling this with the assassin nerfs, we expect her not to be very strong unless you open with a lot of Dianas and the items to match, such as Infinity Edge or Titan's Resolve. Fiora. Mana increased from 0 over 75 to 0 over 95. Fiora was overperforming at 3-star, being flexible in Duelist and Enlightened comps as she was easy to slot in the early and mid game. We don't expect this nerf to massively impact her role, as she will still be very viable as an item holder. Nasus. Mana increased from 0 over 60 to 0 over 80. Magic resist reduced from 50 to 40. This Nasus nerf is very sizable, and we'll unlikely see the big dog being 3-starred in many games now. We suspect that he'll be a fine early game chosen to get you into the later levels though, as he could hold tank and AP items well. Nicolai. Spirit toss damage reduced from 100, 150, and 250 from 225, 300, and 600. Bonus damage per hex increased by 80% from 20%. As someone who has been recently dominating the recent meta, Nicolai's role will be more in line with her League of Legends counterpart of sniping long-range targets with her spears. Hopefully you won't be seeing her assassins one-shot whenever they're right beside her now. We think she still will be a viable champion, just not one that will guarantee you wins if you decide to itemize and 3-star her. Wukong. Crushing blow attack damage scaling reduced from 240 to 250 to 260%. We suspect that this change will phase Bonky Kong carry out of the meta. Coupled with the divine nerfs, it's unlikely that he'll be able to pull his weight in the late game now. Yasuo. Strike and steel attack damage reduced from 180 to 185 to 190%. Yasuo has been incredibly consistent recently in the Duelist comp, but similar to Wukong, this nerf should see Duelists come down a peg in terms of power. It may still be viable if you natural a lot of Yasuos and good items now, but it's certainly not a comp to force. Final thoughts on 1-cost. If you notice a pattern, most of the 1-cost reroll comps have been hit hard. So as a general heuristic, we recommend you not playing these comps this patch unless you can hit a 3-star champion very early. It's still fine to pick these up as 1-cost chosens and then use them as an item holder for your 4 and 5-cost carries. 2-cost. Braum. Attack speed increased to 0.75, mana reduced from 30 over 70 to 30 over 60. Braum was one of the most underperforming units in 11.3, so Riot decided to give him a little bump. We don't expect these changes to make him an S-tier unit, but he should still feel a little bit better now to throw into your Vanguard and Dragon Soul comps. Nautilus. Armor increased from 45 to 55, magic resist increased from 30 to 40, and Fabled shield damage reduction reduced from 60 to 50%. The difference between Fabled and non-Fabled Nautilus was night and day. This change aims to shift some of his later game power into the early game with improved base stats. This means that he'll be performing much better as a flexible frontline unit if you happen to have copies of him. Teemo. Spore Cloud Dart prioritizes current targets now instead of the highest attack speed. This change means that you have to be a lot more mindful of your Teemo positioning, as he won't be prioritizing high target carries as Zed or Kayle. However, he should feel more consistent as a damage dealer if you position him to focus a critical target. Zed. Attack speed reduced from 0.8 to 0.75. Zed was already falling out of favor, and we expect this change to push him even further out. However, with the nerfs to 1-cost reroll champions, he might find a way to sneak back into viability as he always does. 3-cost. Irelia. Bladestorm disarm duration increased from 2.5 to 3 to 4 seconds from 2.5, 3, and 3.5 seconds. Irelia 3 is getting a slight buff, but this change is super inconsequential. If you find her 3-star naturally, then that's great, but she's definitely not one to chase after. Katarina. Death Lotus number of targets were reduced from 4 to 5 to 6 from 4, 6, and 8. Death Lotus spell damage was reduced from 600, 900, 1500 from 600, 900, and 1650. Katarina 3-star was shredding through entire teams and felt super frustrating to play against with almost no counterplay. This change paired with the Warlord nerfs is going to put her in a more reasonable spot. She'll definitely be a good champion to 3-star and will put in a good amount of work, but we suspect that you'll need a good team to back her up this patch. Kennen. Slicing Maelstrom damage increased from 350, 550, and 1200 from 300, 450, and 1200. This Kennen buff is nice, but it doesn't change the core issue that Kennen isn't often casting his ultimate in the late game. He'll still be fine in your Ninja or Keeper comps, but otherwise steer clear from Kennen. Nico. Blooming Burst increased from 200, 300, and 400 from 150, 225, and 375. Attack speed increased from 0.75 from 0.7. And Fabled bonus multiplier was reduced from 200 to 150%. This change aimed to shift some of Nico's identity away from the Fabled comp. Despite this, we still don't recommend playing Nico outside of it. The Fabled comp should see better viability in the next patch, with moderate buffs to all the Fabled units in the early to mid game. Nunu. Consume damage reduced from 450, 650, and 1800 to 450, 700, and 1500. Nunu 3-star often is an alternative win rate condition in the Elderwood and Brawler comps if you itemize them. Realistically, this change isn't the biggest hit to Nunu 3, so he's still a good unit. The Brawler and Elderwood nerfs are much more influential to his power, and we'll likely see Nunu being played if those trades are able to weather the nerf storm. Shyvana, health reduced from 750 to 700, magic resist reduced from 80 to 60, and burden damage is reduced from 125, 250, and 500 from 150, 300, and 600. Shyvana was terrorizing the mid-game and often felt unfair to play against with the amount of easily accessible power that she had with the Brawler and Dragon Soul traits. This nerf is quite noticeable, so you'll definitely not be able to rely on her as a solo carry in the late game anymore. 4 cost, Aatrox. Infernal Chains damage increased from 400, 600, and 2000 from 350, 550, and 1500. Aatrox 3-star felt super underwhelming, so hopefully some added damage takes him up a notch. He'll require some testing this patch when it comes out, but we don't suspect that this change will make him the carry that Riot wants him to be. Asol. Voice of Lightning damage reduced from 325, 500, and 1400 from 325, 500, and 1750. This change won't affect most games, and even in those rare circumstances where someone does get that Sneezing Dragon at 3-star, he'll still likely one-shot the whole team. Cho'Gath. Armor increased from 40 to 60, Rupture targeting updated to reduce randomness, same as Morgana. The Cho'Gath AI buff is massive. He's gonna be a much more consistent frontline now. The added armor is always welcome and allows him to ultimate another time. We would consider picking up Cho'Gath Chosen if you're lacking some frontline and you can't afford the perfect Chosen. Kale. Divine Ascension wave damage reduced from 100, 150 to 400 from 100, 180, and 500. Kale by far was the most consistent 4-cost carry, as she can utilize a lot more items than her counterparts. This nerf is certainly noticeable. On top of her Divine trait being nerfed, we'll probably be seeing less Kale. This won't mean that she'll be entirely dead or anything, but you won't see half the lobby trying to force Kales. Morgana. Hollow ground damage reduced to 250, 400, and 1600 from 250, 400, and 2000. Similar to the Asol change, in this 1% of games where someone does get a 3-star Morgana, she'll be a bit weaker. 1600 damage is still a ton of damage, so don't expect your team to stay alive for too long. Olaf. Ragnarok cleave damage increased from 50% at all levels from 40, 45, and 50%. Ragnarok now blocks 80 damage reduction debuff. Olaf has been in a tricky spot where some games he just feels downright unstoppable and others completely useless. The issue with Olaf is that he needs the perfect items to be comparable to other carries such as Kale, but with other comps being nerfed and him being slightly buffed, we expect Olaf to be in a much better position than ever. He'll also no longer receive the AD reduction buff nor get kicked out of the map from Lee Sin when in Ragnarok, which is always nice to see. Talon. True Strike attack damage scaling increased from 240, 250, and 300% from 240, 250, and 275%. Talon 3 was another 3-star that felt super underwhelming, so the slight touch-up should definitely bring him back on par with some of the other 3 and 4-cost carries. We still don't think that he's one of the best, but at least he won't feel as bad as before. Trinimer. Spinning dash speed has increased, now looks for targets in a slightly larger range to spin towards. Mana adjusted from 50 over 100 to 60 over 100. Trinimer has been in an awkward position where he couldn't quite carry as a solo, but served as a secondary damage dealer. The improved spins and mana should improve the quality of life a lot, but we'll have to see how these changes play out to really tell if he can serve as a primary carry. Xayah. Featherstorm attack damage increased from 250, 275, and 325 to 250, 275, and 350%. Xayah has been struggling a bit since the nerfs in the last patch. This change doesn't really change too much, but similar to Talon, shouldn't feel as bad when you 3-star her. 5 cost. Ornn Eternal Winter. Hits increased from 5 to 7 until Frozen. Eternal Winter was by far the best Ornn artifact, and this change does help lessen the power of differential. Despite the nerf, Eternal Winter still is one of the best Ornn item artifacts due to the sheer amount of value that you get from the attack speed slow. Ornn Mana Zane. Mana Restore duration reduced from 8 to 4 seconds. Mana Zane, on the other hand of the spectrum, was the least impactful artifact, and this buff is a welcome change. Throw this on Zilean or Yuumi to watch the heals roll out. Samara. Attack range reduced from 660 to 420. 420. Samara, especially when itemized with just a Deathblade, was decimating entire boards. Even at 1-star, she was able to consistently carry from a safe distance. This nerf is going to be very noticeable, so you're going to need to pay a lot more attention to positioning so she doesn't get assassinated or stunned mid-fight. Yone. Unforgotten damage increased from 350, 750 to 9,999. Seal Fate damage increased at 3-star to 20,000. Yone hasn't quite returned to his former glory in set 4, so he's getting some much needed buffs this patch. The extra damage is certainly beneficial, but we don't think it's really going to change his position in the meta. Items: Deathblade, 20 to 10 AD per stack, and 1 to 4 starting stacks. Deathblade will now get better starting AD now at the cost of later fight damage. Units who utilize it as well as Samara and Olaf will feel slightly worse the longer the fight goes on, but should be able to ramp up quite quicker. Static Shift is going from 80 to 60 damage, 4, 5, 6 targets hit to 4 targets hit. It will no longer deal bonus damage to shields, and it can now critically strike. When Shift crits, it also reduces the MR of targets hit by 60% for 6 seconds. Shift has always been in an awkward spot, and it's not been too hot in the new set. That being said, this new rework should put Shift in a position to be in the best in slot items for heavy magic damage teams such as Kayle and potentially mages. Quicksilver now blocks the AD reduction buff. There's a bug where QSS didn't block Morgana's Dazzler effect, but it should now be fixed. In accordance to this, Morgana is essentially nerfed, but still definitely a great choice in Siphoners and Enlightened. Gargoyle Stoneplate, 15 to 20 armor and magic resist. Gargoyle being buffed by 25% is nothing to scoff at. Units such as Annie, Sejuani, Aatrox, and Shen will all appreciate this buff. If you have a good 2-star unit such as Garen in the early game, slamming Gargoyles may not be a bad call. Sunfire Cape, 2 to 2.5 burn cadence. This means that the intervals between burns of the Sunfire Cape are being increased. We don't think that this will change Sunfire from being the instant slam that it is in the early game, but the item will fall off harder now. Alternatives such as Morello will also be more appealing, especially in the late game. Well, that's all we have for the patch rundown. Expect a huge change to the meta with lots of old reroll comps being rotated out. Stay tuned when the new patch drops, as we'll have the information and tips that you'll need to continue your TFT climb. Thank you so much for bearing with me through this entire video. It was quite a long script, and I definitely have been talking for the past 3 hours because of my stream, which I stream on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 6 to 8 p.m. PST. Just under the username of @Nathan_ing, just gonna put that in there. I don't play TFT, but on Mondays I play League of Legends, and on Fridays I do just chatting. Anyway, thank you guys so much. Make sure you go to ProGuides.com if you want to up your TFT game today and get yourself a coach. With all that being said, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.